night, we step into the silent, terrifying moments where life took a hard, wrong turn. These aren't just case files. They're the memories that cling to the people who lived them. The worst part of it was the quiet. When the police finally found the truck, it was just sitting there, abandoned by the Rock Island campground deep in the Cascade Mountains. The three little girls, Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia, were gone. Their dad, Travis Decker, was supposed to have dropped them back with their mother in Wenatchee, but he never showed. That was May 30th, 2025. 3 days later, on June 2nd, they found the bodies. The scene was awful, but the details that came out later made it feel colder. The girls, 9, 8, and 5, had died from suffocation. They were tied up with zip ties, plastic bags over their heads. Homicide. The father, Travis, a 32-year-old former army soldier, was the only suspect. His truck had a bloody handprint, and they found his search history had been full of questions about moving to Canada. He had the training, the military survival skills, to just vanish into that rugged wilderness. The manhunt, led by the US Marshals, lasted nearly 4 months. Everyone knew he was out there, somewhere, hiding. The search ended on September 18th, 2025, on Grindstone Mountain, less than a mile from where his daughters were found. They used a drone, and it spotted some decomposed human remains. Just bones, scattered, along with some personal items and clothing. The US Marshals declared him dead a few days later in a court filing to close his case. DNA testing confirmed it was him on September the 26th. The sheriff said they could finally close that dark chapter. The Chelan County coroner, though, said the final unsettling truth is that they will likely never know how Travis Decker died. No cause, no manner. He was just gone. Then he was found. And the only answers left are the ones he took with him up the mountain.
It started not with a scream, but with a parking ticket. The Tesla had been sitting up in the Hollywood Hills for weeks, just another nice car abandoned on the curb. The neighbors noticed, of course, but it was the kind of neighborhood where you minded your own business, until the city finally tagged it and towed it away. That's how it got to the impound lot, a routine failure to follow the 72-hour rule. It was in the lot a few days later when the smell became something they couldn't ignore. Not just old trash, but something deeper, clinging to the dry heat of September. When the police finally opened the front trunk, they found her, Celeste Rivas Hernandez, who had been missing since the year before. The officers later had to admit that, based on the state of things, she had likely been dead inside that quiet, sealed space for several weeks. Right there in the hills, where people walk their dogs. She was 15 years old, or close to it, and they found a tattoo on her finger, one that simply read, "Shh." The thing that stays with you is that nobody knows how she died. Not the police, not the medical examiner. The cause is still deferred, just a gap in the official story. A silent, empty space where an answer should be. The car belonged to a singer who was out on tour, and he hadn't reported it stolen. It leaves a hole in the logic. This big question mark about how a young girl, whose life had already been difficult, could end up in a silent, high-tech box, just waiting for a parking officer to trigger the discovery. The silence around the why and the how feels heavier than the actual death.
Everyone who knew them said the twins, Benjamin and Megan, were closer than anything. They were 17, living in a quiet house in Katy, Texas. That's why what happened on September the 29th, 2021, just feels wrong. Benjamin called 911 himself. "I just killed my sister," he told the operator. When the deputies arrived, he was trying to give Megan CPR, but she was already gone, stabbed fatally. At the trial, Benjamin and his defense team said he was asleep. They called it a severe sleepwalking episode, a parasomnia. Benjamin claimed he woke up with his hands around a knife that was in Megan's neck, thinking the whole thing was a really realistic nightmare. They brought in a sleep expert who confirmed Benjamin had a family history of sleepwalking and argued the action was non-volitional. He wasn't in control. The family insisted there was no motive. He loved his sister. But the prosecutors didn't buy the sleepwalking story. If he was asleep, why call 911 and try CPR? Those were the actions of someone who was conscious and aware. They pointed to the autopsy, which showed 2 stab wounds, not the one Benjamin first claimed. The knife itself was a military-style survival knife his father had just given him. The defense claimed the lack of blood spatter meant Benjamin had only covered her with a pillow to stop the bleeding, but the prosecution argued he was trying to muffle her screams. In February 2025, the jury came back with a guilty verdict for felony murder. He got 15 years in prison, eligible for parole in 2032. Even now, he maintains the killing wasn't his fault, that he was just a sleepwalker trapped in a nightmare. But the question remains, was he truly sleeping when his hands picked up that knife? Or did he wake up just in time to try and undo something terrible he had been fully awake to do? You're left wondering if a dream can really hold a person guilty. I still think about the heat that day. It was late July in Texas, just brutal, even before the sun was all the way up. The police were called out early to a house in Spring for a missing kid, a 7-year-old named Troy. The adoptive parents said he'd been gone since 4 a.m, but something felt wrong to the deputies, like they were being told a story that wasn't true. 7-year-olds don't just wander off quietly like that. The small details that came out later are the ones that stick in your head. It started over a snack, some oatmeal cream pies, and maybe some donut sticks. Food the boy wasn't supposed to touch. That's what they were fighting about the night before. Court documents showed the father was sending dark texts about getting locks on the fridge, and even wrote something chilling about ending up killing him. All this over a few cheap desserts, and then the next morning, the child is gone, and they're calling the cops. When the deputies searched the house, they didn't have to look far. They found Troy in the garage, stuffed inside the top-load washing machine. I can't stop picturing that moment. The heat of the garage, the silence, and the officer just looking down into the empty steel drum. The father is charged with capital murder, but it doesn't bring back the life he was fighting for. This was a foster child who thought he'd finally found a family, and all he did was try to find a little sweetness in the kitchen. I just wonder what he was thinking in those last minutes, inside that cold, heavy appliance. It feels like a wound that never really closed for anyone who knows the full story. I keep seeing that photo of her, the one the news uses. Irina, 23 years old, came here from Ukraine just to finally be safe, you know? She lived in a bomb shelter over there, fighting to get out. And then she's here for what? A year? That's what gets me. The quiet cruelty of it all. The train footage is why this thing keeps playing in my head. It was August, the heat just sitting on everything. She gets on the light rail in Charlotte and takes a seat. Just a normal thing people do 100 times a day. Then there's this guy, De Carlos Brown, sitting nearby. They never spoke. Not a look, not a word between them. The camera just shows him sitting there, and then, without a single cue or reason, he pulls out a knife. Just a pocket knife. Nothing dramatic. He stands up, moves toward her, and that's it. It's over in seconds. The The scream from the other passengers is what they had to mute on the broadcast. You don't want to know what that sounds like. It wasn't a scream of anger. It was just shock and horror, like a sound the human body shouldn't make. She just fell. She collapsed right there on the floor of the train. They caught him fast, but the question everyone keeps asking is, why was he even there? 14 arrests, schizophrenia. His own mother tried to get him committed because he was becoming violent at home. The police and the courts knew who he was, but he was just riding the train like anyone else. That's the part that keeps me up. That absolute lack of consequence, like something in the system just let him drift until he hit her. Now they're going for the death penalty, state and federal, talking about justice and max penalties. But none of that brings her back to the safe life she came here to find. I keep thinking about her, on that train, finally sitting down after everything she went through. She must have thought, okay, I made it. And then, just the sudden, unearned violence of it all. It still feels like a loose thread, something that shouldn't have happened but did, and nobody can really put it back right. It's the quiet moments you remember, the things that shouldn't have been missed. We all saw the last footage. It was Friday night, and the three of them got into a white truck. Not struggling, not funning, just stepping inside because they thought they were going to a party, an event they were invited to. They just volunteered right into the thing that was going to take them away. You see the truck drive off, and that's it. Nobody saw them again until the police started digging. They didn't even have to look far, finding their bodies buried in the garden of some house down in the southern part of Buenos Aires. The truck was found nearby, burned out, like someone was trying to erase the last memory of that ride. It makes you wonder what they were thinking as they drove there, believing they were just heading to a normal weekend night. The story that came out later, the one that makes everything feel wrong, wasn't about the house or the dirt. It was about what happened inside. It was a trap, set by people from a drug gang. But the real dark part is the audience. The police said the whole terrible thing, the torture, it was put on a live stream, not recorded, and then shared but broadcast live, as it was happening, into a private group online. It was reported that 45 people were sitting there, watching it all unfold, like it was just another show. I can't stop thinking about those numbers. 3 women taken to that horrible place and 45 people watching them realize what was happening. They were just watching the screen, knowing where the sound was coming from, knowing those women were terrified, and not one person called for help. Not one. I just keep picturing those faces, the dark room where they were, and all those other dark rooms where the 45 silent viewers were sitting. You have to wonder how many of them are still out there, just waiting for the next stream to start.
The thing I remember most is the sound, and then the quiet afterward. It was barely 5:30 in the afternoon, still bright enough out on Burnside Avenue. We are a 25-mile-per-hour street, the kind of road where kids still ride bikes after school. Maria and Isabella were on that heavy electric bike, talking and laughing the way 17-year-olds do, just moving slow past the curb. We all saw the black Jeep Compass coming up the road. It wasn't just fast, it was completely out of place, pushing maybe 70 in a residential area. The sound was a horrific noise, more of a deliberate slam than a crash, followed by a long, scraping sound as the driver just kept going. He didn't even brake or swerve. He just vanished down the block, leaving the bike's wreckage to catch on the car before finally coming to a stop near the corner. Everyone knew that car. We all saw it parked near Maria's house sometimes, just sitting there for hours. For 3 months, neighbors and family had been telling people, the school, sometimes the police, that this boy was fixed on her, that he was stalking her. She had made complaints. Nothing ever came of those warnings. That's the part that sticks with you, knowing it was going to happen eventually, and nobody stopping it. It wasn't an accident, like the news first said. It felt like something calculated and final. Later that night, the police found him and questioned him for hours. But then they released him, just let him go back home. The next day, before they filed the murder charges, he was back online. He did one of those live video streams, completely calm, sitting right in front of the camera. He said he wanted to offer his sincerest condolences and claimed he was the real victim of the whole situation, dealing with bullying and people spreading lies. In the comments, scrolling across the screen, people were calling him a monster, demanding he go to jail. He just ignored it, quiet and steady, promising that he would eventually tell the full, true story that we weren't getting.
He hasn't told it yet. Tom and Jackie Hawkes were done with the yacht life. They were ready to retire fully, to sell their 55-foot boat, the well-deserved, and move to Arizona to be with their new grandchild. The yacht was worth a lot, about $500,000, but that money just meant a life closer to family. That simple desire is what drew a man named Skylar DeLeon to them, and he wasn't interested in buying. He was interested in stealing their entire savings. DeLeon was broke, a former child actor with a tiny role on Power Rangers, living in a converted garage with his pregnant wife Jennifer. He cooked up a plan to take the boat and the Hawks' money. To earn their trust, he brought Jennifer and his child to the first meeting. But for the real crime, he brought 2 other men, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, an ex-convict, and Alonzo McCain, a former jail guard. It was on November 15th, 2004, off Newport Harbor, that the test cruise turned wrong. DeLeon and his crew overpowered the couple. They were bound and gagged and forced to sign over the yacht's ownership. After the paperwork was done, they were tied to the boat's 65-pound anchor and thrown alive into the ocean. Their bodies were never recovered. The next day, Skylar and Jennifer were on the yacht, allegedly trying to clean up any evidence with bleach wipes. DeLeon told police the Hawkses had just driven off after selling him the boat. The whole thing fell apart when accomplice Alonzo McCain confessed, giving the horrific details of the murder. For their roles, DeLeon and Kennedy were eventually sentenced to death. Jennifer Henderson got life without parole, but Tom and Jackie Hawkes are still missing. Sometimes I think about that anchor chain, just letting them sink in the dark water. You can sell a boat, but you can't buy back the peace.